All right, everybody. Sorry I was a little late this evening. Some technical difficulties this evening, namely getting my kids to bed was a little bit trickier this evening. But I'm here now and we're ready to go over some graphing. Okay. So the game plan is to just kind of go over these different graphing problems, take a look at the different types that we're going to have, maybe talk some exam expectations, things like that. And just kind of go from there. Okay. If you're watching this later, which I'm assuming a lot of you are, since I only unfortunately posted this review sheet this morning, then no worries. That's great. If you see any questions that come up, you can't type in the chat window, obviously, unless you're here right now, but you can ask me some questions later on. Okay. So taking a look at our first problem here. This one, we're supposed to sketch the graph by making a table. Okay, now making a table isn't always the best option, and I will actually show you an alternative way to tackle this problem. But one of the easiest ways to graph, honestly, anything is really just to find a bunch of different solutions. So essentially, what you're doing here is you're putting blanks in for your variables, and you're trying to figure out what are some possible values that could go in for X and for Y respectively. Okay. So first things first, I'm thinking -5 and 0 would be a good one, right? I am thinking 0 and -1 would be a really great option. And I am thinking 5 and -2 would be a good option. All of those, if you plug them in for X and Y, will get the left side to be -5. Okay. Then all I got to do is plot those as if they were ordered pairs. So there's my -5, 0. There's my 0, -1. And there's my 5, -2. Okay. At this point, I connect them all with a line and I'm done. I've drawn better lines in my life, but you get the idea. Okay. So again, this finding just a bunch of different values that work is one of the easiest ways you can go about creating a graph. Okay. I am going to show you an alternative way to do this one. On like if the instructions on your exam didn't explicitly say make a table, another thing that you can do is you can convert to slope intercept form. Okay. What we have to remember is, oops, excuse me on that. What we have to remember about slope intercept form is that slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Okay. So basically, if you want an equation to be in slope intercept form, what you need to do is get the y by itself. So basically, you're going to need to solve for this y. Okay. We would do that by subtracting x from both sides. And then we'll get 5y equals -x minus 5. We can't really combine those. And then we would divide everything by 5. And in this particular one, that actually works out reasonably well, okay? Because what we end up with is y equals, we're going to make that -1/5 x because there's an imaginary 1 before the x. Not imaginary, it's really there, but we don't write it. And then -1 at the end. Okay, and we would use slope intercept form to create the graph that you see over on the left. Now, let's say you don't really remember what slope intercept form is. Well, I'm going to skip ahead really quick. I'm going to go past that one. Oops, I got to go on to the next page. Sorry. And I'm going to take a look at one of these slope intercept form problems. Okay. So looking at one of these slope intercept form problems. Okay. That would be numbers 3 and 4. Both of those are in slope intercept form. Okay. So looking at graphing those, again, y equals mx plus b. Basically, the only things you need to know are this. B is your y-intercept, and m is your slope. Okay, and slope we define as rise over run, or if we want one more way for fun, it would be change in y over change in x. Okay, I know it's a triangle symbol, but that little triangle just means change. Okay, So looking at how to graph in slope-intercept form for this particular one over here, -5 is your y-intercept. I'm going to graph that first, which means going down to -5 right there. Okay. Then I'm going to use my slope of 3/4. So that means I'm going up 3 and over 4. If I go from there up 1, 2, 3, over 1, 2, 3, 4, I end up right there. Okay, now I shouldn't make all those little dots in there. Okay, but we get the idea, right? I connect them with a line and I'm all good. Two interesting things then about number 4. Number 4, we don't have a plus b, right? We don't know what our b is. Okay. In that particular instance, you would assume it's 0 because adding 0 doesn't change that problem. Okay. So we're going to stick a +0 in the middle. The other thing that we see is we have a negative slope. Okay. My suggestion, if you have a negative slope, like in this case, -4/3, is to rewrite it as -4/3. Or if you really want to be fancy, 4 over -3. What that'll do is that'll help you remember what you're supposed to do. Okay. So, like, I prefer the first one here, to be honest with you. That indicates to me that my rise is -4. So I'm actually going to go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go still +3, though, right 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One good thing you may want to do on your exam is look back at any graphing problem that involved slope. Okay. And just make sure that your positive and negatively sloped lines travel the opposite direction. Okay. So as you can see, my first line over here, that one went up and to the right. And then my line in number 4, that one went down and to the right because that one was a negatively sloped line. Okay. Um, just for fun, let's go back to that original problem. Okay. Going back to that original problem, if we were to actually then make this graph using slope intercept form, I'm going to use the green color. -1 would be my y-intercept. Oh, look, I had a point there already. And then -1/5 is the same thing as going down 1, right 5. Down 1, right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I end up with the exact same, two of the exact same points that I had on there already. Okay. So in the end, it doesn't really matter how you tackle those. Okay. Um, Before we hit the other slope problem, I want to quickly go over finding X and Y intercepts. Um, Honestly, I don't know that I'll necessarily ask you this specifically on the exam. I might though. Okay. So just remember, if you want to find an X intercept, you set y equal to 0. If you want to find a y-intercept, you set x equal to 0. Okay? Because the whole idea is it should be the one that you're solving for is your intercept. Okay? So I'm plugging in 0 for y, finding x for my x-intercept. So for this particular one, I'll do my y-intercept first, I guess. I would do 2 times 0 plus 3y equals 12. 3y equals 12. Y is 4. So y equals 4 is my y-intercept. I'll do the other one in green. I'm going to set y equal to 0 this time. I get 2x equals 12. I get, or 2x equals 12, excuse me, and I get x equals 6. Okay. Oh, look, they make a straight line. Hooray. Okay. Finding x and y intercepts is a solidly good skill to have. Don't know that I'll ask him directly on the exam. I guess you'll have to wait and find out. Jackson asked a good question. How many points do you have to extend the graph by? Honestly, to me, that's not really a huge deal how many you do. Okay. So if you're making a table, okay, so like we had in this top one here, when you're making a table, you should have at least 3 points. Okay. And that's just for your own safety. Okay, because if you get one of them wrong, you're never going to be able to tell if you only have two. If you have three, then you can tell. When we're talking problems with slope intercept and things like that, then really it's not a big deal. Just 2 points there is totally fine. If you feel like extending it further, go ahead. Okay. Um, okay. Last two actual graphing problems, and then we'll get how to write some equations in there, okay? This is the format that we tend to forget, okay? And we haven't done this in a while. It's called point slope form. I feel like switching colors. Go blue. Point slope. It works very similar to slope intercept form, but there's a catch. Okay. First off, this number is still your slope. Okay, so that number that in this case comes right before the parentheses and then the x is still your slope. Okay. What you're going to use the rest of the equation for is to figure out a starting point. Okay. Um, Basically, the really easy way we talked about making a starting point is to figure out the x and y values that would make each side of the equation 0. Okay, so I'm going to get that extra stuff out of the way. Basically, what you're asking yourself is this: what would I plug in for x to make the right side 0? If I want to simplify it even further, in this particular case, I'm really just asking a simple question. Blank plus 1 equals 0. That's -1. I'm doing the same thing on the other side for y. Blank minus 3 equals 0. That's 3. Okay. I put those together in a nice little ordered pair. That's my starting point. So right there. Okay. Once you have your starting point, then you use your slope of 1/2 to make more points. Again, it's rise over run. So I go up 1 over 2, and you can do that as many or honestly as few times as you want. In the end, it doesn't really matter. You're just kind of making it look prettier. Okay. Connect them with a line, and we're all set. We'll do the same thing over here. We're going to find the x and y value that make the equation 0. So blank plus 2 equals 0. That's -2. Blank plus 3 equals 0. That's -3. That is my starting point, which is right here. Then I have a whole number slope. We haven't looked at any of those yet, but if I put it over 1, now it's not a whole number slope anymore and really not so scary. My rise is -2 and my run is 1, so I'm going to go down 2 and right 1. Okay, I'm not going to extend that one any further because I really don't have a whole lot of room and I don't feel like it. Okay, what you're basically now doing in this next section is you're trying to create an equation that's either in point slope or, you said scrolling back up, slope intercept form. Okay, so basically you've got to decide whether you want to write it in y equals mx plus b, slope intercept form, or whether you want it to look like one of those two right above it. Okay, there's an easy way to decide which of those formats you should choose. Okay, slope intercept form specifically gives you the y-intercept. Okay, as we noted up here. Okay, so if you have the y-intercept, I would use slope intercept form. If you don't have the y-intercept, don't use slope intercept form. Okay, so for the first one, I have the y-intercept. My form says y equals mx plus b, m is slope, b is y-intercept. All I'm going to do is plug them in. I literally just put the slope in for m, and I just put in the y-intercept for b. That was it. There was really nothing else to do there. Okay. Number 8's a little bit trickier because we've got to use that format that we kind of saw in the last two problems that looks approximately like this. We got a couple places that we got to put some numbers. We got to put a number here, got to put a number here, and we got to put a number here. Okay. Let's deal with the easy ones first. I'm going to rewrite that because my erasing skills were obviously not so great there. Okay. We're going to start with this one. The number that goes right there is your slope. I've been told what my slope is. My slope is 1, so I'm going to put a 1 there. Okay. Now, basically, here's the slightly hard part. I really don't think it's that bad, but you kind of got to look at what we did up here. To get my x, check out number 5, okay? To get x is -1 meant I had x plus 1 in the problem. To get y equals 3 meant I had y minus 3 in the problem. I basically had the opposite thing in the problem because then when I plug in for x and y, I would get 0. Okay. So what that means is for this one, there's my x value. My x value is 2. So I'm going to put a minus 2. Okay. Because if I were to plug in 2 for x, I would get 0. This is my y value. I'm going to put a plus 1 because now if I were to plug in both x and y, I'd get 0 on both sides. So there's my equation. Okay. Now, if you don't want to write the 1 at this point and you want to get rid of that one that's your slope. Okay. So this one. Okay. If you don't want to write that one, that's totally okay. You can get rid of that. Okay. But you know what? For something like this, where you're trying to make it clear that's your slope, I don't think that's the hugest deal. Okay. Number 9. Number 9 is tricky for this particular reason. Okay. You already have some information you can put in. You can put in y plus 2 because their y value is negative 2. You can put in x minus 2 because your x value is positive 2. You can't put in your slope because you can't put in your slope because guess what? You don't have it. You don't have a slope. Okay. So what you have to do is this. Okay. Shouldn't have erased all of that. Like I said, erasing skills not so good. Okay. What you need to do is you need to figure out your slope. Okay. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to subtract your y values and you're going to subtract your x values. You're going to figure out the change in y over the change in x. Okay. Change in y over change in x is your slope. To figure out change really just means subtraction. Okay. So I'm going to subtract my two y values of negative 2 and 3. It doesn't really matter what order I subtract those in. I'm going to do 3 minus negative 2 because I want that double negative to line up. Okay. Then I'm going to subtract my x values. My x values are 0 and 2. Here's where your order matters a little bit. You got to subtract in the exact same order that you subtracted the first time. So I subtracted my right y value minus my left y value. I did the same order here. Okay. Now, if I put that all together, I get a positive 5 on top. I get a negative 2 on the bottom. That's my slope. Okay. You could also do this by simply counting. Like that's totally okay too. Okay. Let me get a little eraser in here, shall we? Okay. There we go. Okay. You could also do this by simple counting. Okay. So you could basically be like, okay, as I go from negative 2 to 3, that's an increase of 5. As I go from 2 to 0 for my x values, that's a decrease of 2. Either way, I still get kind of the exact same thing that I did before. Okay, I get 5 over negative 2 or negative 5 over 2, doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm going to plop that in over here, and I'm all set. Okay. Hershey asked for good points taken off. We were at the 1 there. I assume he's talking about the slope that I talked about before. No, honestly, I don't think so, especially because if you're really putting it in point slope form, there's supposed to be a number there, but I wouldn't take off points in that one either way. Okay. I'm not exceptionally picky about that kind of stuff. Okay. Hope this was a good review of graphing and some of those graphing skills you'll need for the exam. If you're watching this later and any questions came up on this, definitely feel free to come visit me and let me know. Hope this was helpful. Have a good rest of your night.